Hello everybody, and we're back with part 2 of hair. Now, in this part of the series, I'm going to be talking about the different kinds of curly hair and some tips and tricks on how to draw anything from like wavy hair to proper coily tight curls. So what we're going to do, for a start, let's just look at wavy hair. Now, with wavy hair, it's often the easiest, I find. If I was going to draw a little face here, we got our little dude. Now, his hair, as you can see, it's not quite proper curls. It is very loosely splayed out. And so what you want to think about when it comes to doing the sections, so like we'd have like a front section up here, we'd have like a little section down here, we'd have this big section over here, because it is a bit harder to section curly hair, not gonna lie, or wavy hair in this case. And what you just want to do is create the impression of the waviness of the hair, and you can do that in gentle movements, often a lot of like loosely wavy lines, basically. And just getting that impression in like so. Obviously I'm going to take this and do some proper drawings, but I'd say the key to wavy hair is lines like this, little S lines, and you can add some variety, you can add some variety in just stretching that S out. You can make it into a bit of a double S as well. But that is generally what you're going to be looking at. A lot of the times it does get a bit defying gravity as well, so you can have some S's going up, and you're just going to use that to build a loose impression of the unruliness of the wavy hair, like so. So that's wavy hair. Now, I'm gonna brush over this because I feel like that's about all I can really say on wavy hair in particular. But we're gonna move now to curly hair. Now, one of the biggest things that I understand with curly hair is both of these two styles are coils, but one is looser than the other. So the way I like to think about it is, think about a spring. You've got your spring. Now, with curly hair, this spring is often a bit bigger and a little bit more stretched out, to the point you can get it like so. I just pulled that out. But there's the different stages that you can involve, and curly hair is often a very stretched out coil. If you look here, let's pick a good spot where I can kind of see in better detail. Here we go. You've got that kind of curl, that waviness to it. And I often draw curly hair in a few ways, but if we go with like the idea of loose coils, we can thicken out this part, thicken out that part, we can add a hint of like the thickness to it. Because it's all that's really happening. Is this kind of twirly curly mess. If we just rub out the lines that you wouldn't see. Oh, a bit too big there. And you start to see the form of a curl. Now, obviously, not every drawing you're gonna draw each individual curl, which is often why when I draw people with like looser curly hair, I make like the top of their head more textured, and then we come in with like those loose, slightly angled curls, and we just bring them in, blending them into the like hair over here. You can add like another one kind of mirroring it. Like so. But I'll explain properly in a traditional sense. But we've got our curly hair. Now for coily hair, this coily hair is also fun. It is a lot trickier to find that balance, but you can see right here with the one in her fringe how it's that tight coil through her hair. And oftentimes what I like to do is, if I take the face, very loosely put together, I don't like to draw the individual strands. I like to give just a loose kind of impression of where her hair will sit. Oh, that wasn't a very good start. Once we got that understanding of how the shape of her hair, she's kind of got like a lion's mane hair. I love it. But she has this kind of, and what I would do then is I would just draw some kind of like bumpy lines, and maybe on the outskirts give that impression of a tight curl. But the way I draw the tight curl is I'd like hinted it there, and just to make it obvious so you guys can see, is I would just create that kind of shape, whereas you can kind of see now it just gives that impression of those really tight locks. And I would repeat this oftentimes. Then if you give me a moment, I'll just draw a bit more. So now we've drawn in a bit more of that hair, and you can see how you can, depending on like how wild, how many strands stick out, you can choose to do a more kind of compact style, where it's very minimal kind of flicks coming out, and then on the other side you've kind of got more of these flicks adding definition. And it is really simple. So as we get to the bottom here, you can kind of see that shape coming in. Getting a bit looser with my definition here just to get it in. You can see more of it coming in, and like you can do these loose shapes here, like so. So one of the things I would say with coily hair is I tend to do a shape a bit like this, to give the impression of those coils, those really tight curls, because you don't always see the space between each of the twists that comes along, depending on how tight it is. But this is usually that kind of style of coily hair. So now we've got our understanding of these three basic steps with wavy, curly and coily hair. I'm just going to take a moment to sketch out the bases to my little sketchbook behind, and then I'll show you how to do a more in-depth kind of actual study of the curls. Okay, so now that I've done each of the bases drawn out for y'all, let's get started with the hair. Now you may be able to faintly see how I've kind of added some little sections in just to guide me where my hair is going, what it's doing, how far it's coming, that kind of thing. But we've got these very loose guideline shapes. Now, this is for the wavy hair. So we're going to use that like kind of S shape. You can get a little bit flicky with it. Doesn't have to be overly detailed, because this is more my preference of how I like to draw different hairstyles. And you can also kind of notice how, especially within the length of this kind of hair, how because the hair gets longer and the weight pulling on the hair tends to usually soften up those waves. So you go from like a harsher wave with the short hair here at the top, and as you're coming down, you can just elongate it, just stretch it all the way out. Just like this. Again, we can add some like nice flicky bits. One of my favorite things to do with this kind of hair as well is when you're doing like, say you've got the side of the face here, for example, when you're doing like a curl that comes over the face, you can give it some extra dimension, like so. So you create your like, I'll do it again. You create your initial guideline. And then, say I want to make it thicker underneath, and I bring it this way, and when it crosses this point, we're going to twist it over so it looks like the hair kind of bends and twists. Like so. So you'll notice I might put a few little examples of that in this hair, just to kind of give the idea of like this hair is a bit unruly, but it's not completely out of control. It's mainly going for that, again, that impression of the wavy hair and the texture. You can add a few like little flicks and stuff into. Now, the top of his head, if you can see here, is quite flat, so we're not going to add too much in the way of texture, but we are going to reveal that, like, man's hair is still a little bit wavy on the top. So we got those nice little bumps to kind of bring in that. And the back of his hair is a little flatter than the front of it. Well, that's okay. That's where we get our little elongated shapes. And we can just add some impressions of these wavy parts. Slowly blending it in. until we've got that rough kind of, I want to give him a few looser strands on the outside because they stick out a little bit. And there you have it. So that is our first one with the curly hair marked as wavy. And so we'll move on to the next one now. Okay, so here we are with base number 2 for our curly hair. And so, as you can see, once again, I've kind of created these sections in her hair just to kind of give you all an idea of how I would section it. Now, with this type of curly hair, you are going to see a bit more of that kind of coiling, kind of looser, longer curls. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna choose a few places to just kind of choose where I'm gonna highlight that, because you're not gonna be able to draw every individual curl, although I'm sure some people would, but my preference is not to. I'm quite happy giving just an impression of those curls. And you see them more on the top half of the head rather than the bottom half. So now we've got this idea. I'm gonna go back to that shape, remember. Where we take our lovely curls, we can round them out a bit more just to give that more natural flowy feeling and just blend it in. You can see that curls coming together. This one's just a little bit tighter, but we still can kind of see that curl there. I'm just gonna do a few more, so I'll go quiet and speed up the process for you all. Now we've got some of the fringe ones, and I've noticed, and something you may notice if you do some studies, which I recommend, like, whenever you're trying to learn to do something, always take a moment to study some actual references of people. It does not matter if you can't get it perfect. You want to get a feel for how it's drawn, how you want to draw it, and you want to take your time and just figure out what works for you. But one of the things I've noticed in my observation, especially with curly hair like this, is oftentimes these lovely background curls, even though they appear small, smaller, I'm gonna do it a bit big just to kind of emphasize. But the thickness of the curl doesn't always stay the same all the way through. And that's normal, it's just down to changes in the hair. And you can kind of just get a little bit of loose impression of filling those gaps. And I'm just gonna switch up my method to get those coils in. Put another one over here. And y'all can now see kind of that shape coming together. Probably fit like another nice wide one down here. And we can get like another one over here. But we now got enough going on the top, I feel, where we can kind of get away with just starting to keep some of those like curly flicks in there. But now we're just kind of changing up our methods to kind of fill out the hair. Give it that impression that there's lots of curls going on. And we don't always have to put the full spiral in to get that effect. We just use a lot of the same kind of shapes. Just to guide creating that idea of the wild, curly, poofy hair. And we can put in some loose little curl bits. Like so. You can put as much or as little detail as you want with this. If you don't feel like drawing all of the curls, what you can also do, if I just swap the colour of my pencil so we can show you, is you could also just take that's basic shapes from this. And just build your own kind of version of curls without being extra detailed. Although I would recommend keeping some of the ones in the front fringe visible so people can understand what you were going for. But you can get like a whole different kind of shape with these shapes. You don't have to add all the little details if you don't want to. And honestly, this method is what I was going to apply to the bottom half, where instead of like drawing all the curls, we can just give that impression of the curls because they're tighter and further back, which means you're not going to see as much of the detail as you would have liked to be seeing, maybe. But just keeping that idea of like, you know, you can put like a little bit of an impression in at most, if you want to keep it more simple and straightforward. Remember, curly hair doesn't always follow the rules. You can get some outlier parts. You can get some parts that just don't want to listen. And you get that kind of image there. And of course, like, colouring your piece in is gonna make this kind of easier to follow. And make thicker. For example, like if we just get some of this darker, right? Because that's another thing that really helps when you're trying to define what it is you're doing with your hair. You can make this one a bit darker and get like a little hint of some curls throughout, just to kind of add that idea of the thickness of those luscious locks. And then when it comes to the top half, we just divide this. What you can do is you can kind of colour it in the blanks spaces so it's not so empty anymore. And then what you'll do is you can texture some of this hair to show where the kind of light is falling on the curls. Like so. Because you have to remember the curls are multiple strands of hair grouping together with the flow of things. you get this kind of fun impression to play around with and just go nuts with. Like I said, it's all about finding your comfort zone. You can be more detailed with it, you can add more curls throughout, or you can be more minimal with it and less curls. Either way works, it's just finding where your style sits and where you enjoy drawing it. But I believe that's us done with the curly hair. Okay, so here we are with the third and final reference, with the coily hair. Now, this hair looks very intimidating. Trust me, it's not as intimidating as it is once you get started. So you can see that I've kind of set up these kind of guidelines like we do, just to get an idea for the shape. Now, with this kind of hair, I prefer to just kind of give the impression of the like loose curls, get a bit of flick going on, and you can see with this hairstyle in particular, with this kind of curl, it's got a few branches that kind of stick out a little bit more, and that's okay. You don't want to get too carried away. But you get these really tight looking curls which just need a little bit more of a subtle implication. You get some odd ones that come out really flicky ends going against the grain. And I tend to do a more impressionistic style of this kind of curl because I find that that's like what works for me. And you get more of these like tight, coily, twisty bits. And you can kind of see like the way I'm doing the curls in this is we just take one side like this and just decide that's where the flick point is going to be, so we come back from the flick point and we can just give these a little go. And you can make the other side a bit sharper if you'd like to, because at the end of the day, that's where our kind of curls will be. Kind of when you do a bit of texture on them, that kind of thing. And if you need to make them a bit more bendy, don't be afraid to do a little guideline of where you want to twist them. So you can see here how I'm using this to try and make a kind of center line. And then we've got our other side coming in there. And we do the same over here because it's coming over her shoulder. We can get that idea without trying to make it too stiff, you know. The point is to try and keep them small though, because with this type of hair, it's tight and a lot smaller than the broad curls of like the curly hair that we just did. Oftentimes, when doing the detail up here, you might not see as much of the strands. And then she's got this really tight one in the middle, and with a bit of springiness to it, which I think is really cute, by the way. We love little cute hair. It will get lost within the top of her head, so it's okay. And we just gotta remember that little trick of like creating those impressions. She gets like a little flick over here. Give her a little flicky bit there, just to kind of fill it in. Don't be afraid to kind of layer stuff in with the fringe as well, just to bulk it up. But we're going to do that, and then we're going to repeat the process on the other side. So I'm going to speed this up for you folks. Now we've got the outline kind of done, and what I like to do is I like to just add a couple of like filler strands where we've got like maybe like a little bit of a flicky bit here. I'm just giving the impression of those little curly bits that come throughout her hair that stand out a bit more, whether that's because of the highlights and everything. But I like to just pick little bits just to kind of add that extra bit of texture to everything. We don't want to add too many, but just enough to kind of show off that curly pattern. And again, as with a lot of cases when you're doing like tighter curly hair, you can get away with kind of block colouring it in. Like so. And just take your pencil, and you can do just a little bit of like detailing on this. Now I probably should have sharpened it before doing this, but it's fine. And you'll just add those little flicks, always going in the direction of which way you want the curl to be looking like it's going. So in this case it's going this way. You can, of course, technically, you could, if you wanted to, go absolutely nuts and try and add even more of those, like, curly coils in everywhere. Like I said, it's all about finding that kind of comfort zone with, like, how much detail you want to add. I'm not a big fan of going absolutely nuts with crazy detail. But you can see how you can just build it up. Filling in the spaces. You can add some longer ones. You can add some more like unruly ones, which will stand out at first, but you do kind of have to trust the process. As you're layering these in as well, you have to think that the ones you put down in that empty space, like this one's going to be in the forefront of her hair. So any ones that then come after kind of end up tucked underneath it. Like that. But I think you all can get the idea of how curly hair comes together. And so, what I'm going to do is I finish up kind of putting in some more of these lovely curls is talk about what's coming next. So there's going to be another part to our hair series where I'm just kind of going to go over braids and hair up styles. So hair up, hair half up, hair in plaits, hair in pigtails, hair in ponytails, which will be really basic and kind of a quick run through, because it's all going to be relying on the initial kind of skills that we've gone over so far. And we're going to explore that within other kinds of hair next. So that's what we've got to look forward to for the next video. And after that, we have a list of requests to get through. Our next one after the hair series is done is we're going to be working on heads, kind of trying different angles, how I put together my heads, how I do my spacing, and just giving you little tips and tricks to think about as you draw. I'm also going to shout out one of my favorite artists that has helped me immensely with getting to grips with my skills and being able to draw better and easier. So you've got that to look forward to. But yeah, so as you can kind of see, the layering of these curls coming together is a bit of a messy process. But now I'm probably gonna leave it here, as y'all can get an idea. And again, once you've done all those little detailing bits, you just go through with your pencil and kind of do the lines. Got mixed up with my method then. And decide where the kind of shadows are going to fall. Is the light coming from the front? If it is, then this part of the hair here will have less shadow, and less of those detailing, and you can just go through and gradually build up on everything. So, I believe that wraps up this video. I want to thank you all for following along. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. If you have any requests for any kind of tutorials you'd like to see me do in future, drop a lovely comment. And until next time folks, take care, be safe, bye.